Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building. It's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record button?
Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building. It's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I
button?
thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something?
Hey, Corey, is it as beautiful in Idaho today as it is in Montana?
I don't think it could get any better. It's blue skies, clear blue skies. It's got to be 52, 55 degrees, somewhere in there. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's supposed to get 67 degrees here tomorrow.
Whew. We're
Yeah.
actually cooling down and getting, we've got a front coming in. It's supposed to get some rain and snow here over the next little bit. Our poor kids had spring break last week, and we decided to go camping, and it snowed and rained pretty much the entire week. So now they're back in school, and weather's beautiful.
Wow, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it goes, though. But when I was a kid, we didn't have a spring break. Did you have a spring break when you were a kid?
I think so.
Oh, see, I always think of spring break as like this. It's driven by universities and stuff, like semester breaks. I don't know.
You're
Maybe I'm
thinking
wrong.
about like Miami and Florida and Mexico type spring breaks. We just had spring breaks where the teachers are like, we can't handle these kids anymore. We've got to take a break here.
My school, we never took spring break. When the teachers got to that point, they just beat us.
Well, there's that too. I think I was probably in school right about the time that they started switching from, being
Beatings
able
to detention.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I probably didn't get all the beatings I deserved when I was in school. My grandma had said when I was a little kid, I had two uncles just barely older than me. I'm like, Grandma, I didn't do anything. Well, that's all right. It makes up for the times I didn't catch you. And she'd beat me anyhow. We've created a little bit of response from our previous two podcasts about trustees who maybe aren't as, I don't know what you'd say, informed, as aware of their duties as they should be. I spent some time over the weekend forwarding to some of our Colorado audience their statutes actually written in their state laws about what a trustee's duties are. One of them emailed me back and said, well, now I can see why these people want to claim they're not a trustee. They don't want to be held to that level of accountability.
Yeah.
Well, okay. And then our most recent one where I had to be like a translator. I felt, we heard from a couple attorneys and they were actually pretty polite.
Yeah.
Either that or I did a better job than I was worried about. And my translation of what all these attorneys tell me when I hire them versus what the real way the law says. So for those of you who listen, we appreciate you getting back to us and giving in your thoughts and feedback. I'll try not to be the legal translator anymore. That's getting out on thin ice, Corey. That's almost like
I think you did a good job. You didn't translate. You just shared. You shared the legal advice you were given, which was spot on. And I don't think anybody had any. The attorneys that we had that sent us emails didn't have a problem with any of the information. It was the one just. There was a certain word we used, and we took a little bit too much liberty of how it was actually legally translated. I think was it legal fiction?
Yeah.
And legal fiction could actually be true. It sounds like.
Yeah, sounds like it. But I think the audience knew what we were talking about. So, but I hope for many more years ahead we can stay out of the legal discussions about all this stuff, but with draw deadlines and tag allocations and everything seeming to be this time of year, we get sucked into so much of that. Everybody emails us, not everybody, but so many people email us with, well, why is this that way? Why can't this be? Why? Well, there's a reason for all of it. I mean, maybe we should just do like a 3-page e-guide. E-guide to why it is how it is. And if you don't like
keep
it,
that to 3 pages, then good luck.
You want to know the other thing I've been doing the last few days? I've been going back to I offered to do a module on cow elk hunting for outdoor class. It's going to be a short one. It's only like 3 or 4 chapters, but I did the course outline about 1.5 years ago. And now I'm digging it back out. I'm like, oh man,
you needing to update it? Because if I remember right, that was when you were going full send on your research on feed sources and
now this is like everything you write, even when you're mad and you're going to send an email to somebody, you should let it marinate overnight. And then go read it again the next day and say, is this really what I wanted to say? Because
maybe especially in that case, you should do that.
Yeah. And especially if before you say something to your spouse, think about that before you say it, because you don't get that back. But anyhow, I'm reading this stuff that I wrote. I'm like, Randy, you got so far. I wasn't just off the main trail or the main highway. I was through the ditch, up the berm on the other side, through the fence, and down into some swampy wetlands. I was so far off. Not incorrect, not off by incorrect, but just
in the weeds.
The world. Yeah, the world doesn't need that level of boredom.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where I thought that was helpful. I'm so glad we deferred that course for a year.
No, I do. I mean, I remember you going very deep in a lot of research on feed sources and, I mean, calories per day and calories needed throughout different periods of the year. And that's all good information.
Yeah, but if you're a hunter, all you need to know really for cow elk is they're looking for the best food.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do I find the best food? Well, knock yourself out. You'll find it. Look around. There's places you can find it. But that's about as detailed as it really needs to be. But I guess that's the accountant in me. I just, everything's got to be symmetrical. Left side has to balance the right side. And then you just got to provide way more information than anyone needs.
Yep.
I guess.
I think that's accountants and engineers must be cut from the same cloth, because
You think so?
I think so. I'm the same way. It's like I over research, over provide too much detail, and at the end of the day, they're like, just get me from point A to point B. I'm not on a sightseeing tour here. I don't need to stop and see every pullout. Just get me to the end destination.
Yeah. Well, today that we're recording this is the deadline for Colorado, so it's too late. By the time this podcast gets edited and dropped, it's too late for anybody to apply in Colorado.
Yeah, if you're hearing this, you missed it. If you didn't get in. So
yeah. And yesterday was Montana. I just find it so funny that Montana's deadline is on April Fools. Nothing could be more appropriate. I was getting so many phone calls yesterday from friends and family who live out of state. I'm thankful I was busy. I was so busy filming and other stuff that I'm like, man, I got like 6 or 7 text messages here of, I'm trying to fill out my application. What the blankety blank does this mean? Well, a couple things with that. One, you assumed I care. And two, you shouldn't wait until the last day, you know?
Well, not only that, but I mean, just the people, I saw people posting on social media, Montana has extended the deadline for non-residents to apply to April 15th.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's a cruel April Fool's joke.
That's
because
a cruel
it's April
Fool's
1st.
joke.
I mean, most of the time people are posting, don't forget today's the deadline. When it falls on April 1st, you can actually tell people, no, today's not the deadline. And
yeah, actually, someone sent me one of those and said, "Are you the guy who's behind this?" I'm like, "No." I mean, I thought only at home did I get blamed for things I didn't do or say, but but we do have other deadlines coming up. Not that probably anyone's too worried about it, because the odds of drawing Utah with a deadline of April 25th. Might want to buy lottery tickets.
Yeah.
And then Kentucky, if anyone's interested, that's April 30th. It used to be May 1st. I wonder if that's going to trip some of these procrastinators. I wonder if it's going to trip them up. And then we got Nevada on May 8th. And then we got Idaho on, usually you guys do June 5th. I wonder if you're going to move that.
Is it a Saturday or something this year?
I don't know. I didn't even look.
I'm looking here real quick. So. June 5th. Nope, it's a Wednesday. They'll stick with that.
Okay.
And don't forget Oregon. Oregon's May 15th.
Oh, May 15th. Yeah. Yeah. And if you're a Wyoming resident, your deadline is May 31st. It's weird. Non-residents have a deadline of January 31st. Residents have a deadline of May 31st.
Yeah. And what happens between then and nothing? They just hold our money. They just basically our interest that they gain off of our investment probably funds their activities from January to May.
Yeah, one time I said that, and somebody from Wyoming really went into the nitty gritty of it and informed me that Wyoming's not allowed. They say that Wyoming is not allowed to earn interest on that account. Huh. It's like, well, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Why
even hold our money then?
Yeah, someone should earn interest on it. I mean, I don't get to earn interest on it. I hope Wyoming's earning interest on it.
Well, and when it used to be, $700 or whatever, it's like, yeah, there's probably a little interest there. Now that it's over $2,000 to apply for a special tag there, there's probably some significant opportunity.
Yeah. Well, they'll fire up the printing press. In Wyoming, their printing press, I call it the printing press when they sell points. It's kind of like the federal government printing money. Yeah. When you sell 180,000 points at $50 a piece, that's $9 million just for elk points. Yeah. I need to start a game like that where I can sell something. I don't have to deliver anything. I'm just like, hey, I'm going to sell for $50. I'm going to sell you your place in line right there.
Your certificate.
Okay.
It's a digital certificate.
Yeah, we got to figure this out, Corey. You and I are way behind the curve on this stuff.
Well, the problem is that you just made a cross reference there that probably puts it into better perspective, and that is when the government prints money, it causes inflation, and it dilutes the money we already have.
Yeah.
So if a state fish and game agency is printing points, it's causing point inflation and diluting the points we already have, which is kind of
Man.
the message we've been spreading for a while.
Yeah. Are you an engineer or are you an economist?
Man, I might just have to become both here. I think I just solved the problem. We've got to find a way to reduce the number of points to get inflation in check.
Yeah. There you go.
Point inflation. It's not point creep, it's point inflation.
Yeah. Well, I'm reading what's coming out of the committee in Colorado, and you might want to brace yourself for some point inflation.
Explosion.
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure where it'll end up, but I'm thinking that for us non-residents, it won't be long before we got to burn points for over the counter, or we'll have to do an either or. If you buy over the counter, you're not going to be able to point that day.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I can't see a model that continues to work for Colorado where non-residents just have open over-the-counter opportunity.
No.
Then it becomes a limited, if they cap the number of tags, it becomes a limited entry because they're going to have more demand than tags. And so then you have to apply. And when you apply, it takes a point. And so you can't go hunt Colorado and build points, and you either hunt Colorado or you don't.
Yeah, don't. Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of people ask us, what could be done to kind of force people to plow through these point systems more often. And I think Colorado is looking at that. I don't know what they'll enact because they're so dependent on the non-resident revenue side of it. So I don't know if they'll be able to make the decision that's best for their residents. But, just using Colorado as an example, imagine if they said, okay, you got to burn points for any of the over-the-counter units if you're a non-resident. You burn points no matter what choice you draw, kind of like Nevada does.
Yep.
You burn your points if you get a tag through a raffle, an auction, or a landowner tag. Because there's a lot of people who build a point every year but still go hunt in Colorado.
Yeah.
Because the over-the-counter, you don't have to burn your points. Second choice, you don't burn your points. Returned and reissue tags, you don't burn your points. Landowner, auction, and raffle, you don't burn your points.
And that's great, but it's going to be very short term. The benefit of that, and I fully support that if you're going to hunt, you're going to have to use points.
Yeah.
But it's only going to take a year or two to burn through that, and then they're going to be right into the same point where points start building up, points creep, and even for over-the-counter type stuff, it's going to... I can't wait to see Wyoming. I can't wait to see the numbers on Wyoming this year and see how the changes there affected everything.
The big price increase, you mean?
Yeah, just the price increase, if it's going to force everybody into the regular pool, and if it's going to double, the points that it takes to draw a regular tag in Wyoming, or if people are going to pony up the money and go for the special.
Well, they won't tell you the numbers yet, but they have said that the regular draw 60% of the tags, special draw 40% of the tags. That for elk, the number of applicants in the special pool went down this year.
Yeah.
So those people who didn't do special this year either didn't apply or they moved over to the regular draw.
Yeah.
So it will be interesting to see. I think the other thing that's going to be interesting to see is if Wyoming does a 2,000 whatever, or just over $2,000 with your transaction fee and everything else. If it's like every other time they've made a big change, the first year it has an impact. The next year, everyone looks at the draw odds and says, well, I guess I'm just going to pay more money because I want those good draw odds. And that kind of sets a new bar for the price of non-resident elk hunting. And I wonder if the other states are looking closely to say, Wyoming just broke the $2,000 threshold. Why are we only charging $650 down here in Arizona?
Yeah.
Why are we only charging $1,200 in Nevada? So
Yeah, and this is a Wyoming over the counter for a resident. I mean, it's a go to Walmart and buy the tag if you're a resident. Non-residents have to apply for it, and if you want to apply in that special pool, it's over $2,000. So yeah, other states are looking at it going, hey, if non-residents are willing to pay $2,000 for a tag that a resident can buy for $40 over the counter, what are we doing wrong? We can start generating a lot more revenue here.
Yep.
Yeah.
So before we get everybody's hair on fire about that, we're just here shooting the breeze on it and looking a little bit into our crystal ball of what probably is going to happen. And I think, well, what do they always say in the stock market? Past performance is not indicative of future results or something like that. Well, that theory does not apply to policy and politics. Past indicators are a very strong indicator of future actions.
Yep.
So looking backwards in the rearview mirror, my crystal ball says that you better brace yourself for some increases if Wyoming is able to pull this off.
Colorado.
And you better no, Wyoming is able to pull it off with fee increase.
Exactly. If they're able to.
But then also, you better brace yourself when these committees start getting put together and start meeting on things, like in Colorado. Things change within 2 to 3 years. So.
Yep. Well, look at Colorado. The price, and there's, like you mentioned, they're so reliant upon the non-resident dollar. Because how many non-resident elk tags do they sell?
Man, I don't know that number, but it's a gunny sack full of it's truckloads of them.
Yeah. Yep. So if they've got to cut those tag numbers, which they're going to have to do, they're going to have to make up that revenue somewhere. And if they cut numbers in half, that means they're going to double the price. And they're going to look at Wyoming and say, well, if Wyoming can charge that much, why can't we?
Yeah.
And then it starts again because they're going to cut the tags in half. And I'm just speculating how many, if they cut the tags in half, that means all those tens of thousands of people who don't get a tag in Colorado anymore are going to be spread out across Colorado, across Wyoming, across Montana, across all the other states. So the draw odds are going to go down in those states because there's no longer a guarantee for non-residents in Colorado. So we're just, when we started doing this, we were very optimistic that now is the time to hunt. You have so much opportunity to hunt. I'm starting to feel like the tide's shifting here and opportunity is dwindling, and there will still be opportunity, but it's going to come at a cost. There's going to be a longer line. There's going to be more fees involved. So,
And the one thing I could not have seen this in my crystal ball, the population growth in the Rocky Mountain states. I mean, I guess I got to identify myself as one of the culprits because I moved here 33 years ago and said, you know what? I'm willing to take a $25,000 pay cut so that I can hunt elk every year for $12. That's what a Montana resident elk tag was at the time. I didn't think other people were as foolish as I was or wanted to hunt elk as bad as I did. But obviously,
and I think, the elk hunting isn't the draw that's bringing people to live in the Rocky Mountain states. No. But that lifestyle is the draw. And one of the benefits of living in a Rocky Mountain state is over-the-counter elk hunting opportunities as a resident. So that may not be the reason they're coming here, but it's certainly an effect of their being here.
Yeah, kind of interesting to look at that on a state-by-state basis. I got the numbers from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and I don't know that I'm able to pull it off here. I didn't pull it up, but while Montana's population went up 48%, the number of resident hunters in Montana actually went down by a small number.
Yeah.
But the number of non-resident hunters went way up, almost doubled. Because when you look at, well, where did they all come from? In Montana, most of them came from the B tags, we call them here, or cow tags and doe tags, antlerless tags. So been pretty interesting to see how that has changed. And so, to your point, it doesn't look like all the people moving to Montana necessarily moved here for the hunting, because we got fewer resident tag sales than we had 20 years ago. And so we got to figure out, in Montana anyhow, we're trying to figure out where that goes, what we make of it.
Yep.
But if history's any indicator there,
we know what's coming.
Yeah, the non-residents are probably gonna be the ones who get the pipe pulled out and whack them on the head with it. But
unless they have 0 points. Then they're going to get special treatment.
Yeah. So let's see. We got Utah, Kentucky, we got Nevada, and then here's some emails we've got recently, and they apply to your state of Idaho and the residents of Wyoming. Every year there are the calls that we need to have a point system.
Oh my goodness.
What's the political winds of that?
So I haven't heard much in Idaho, and I don't know if I'm not as connected as I previously was. I think that I would be quickly informed if the winds changed. But the way Idaho works anymore, it's hard to say. But from a point standpoint, I would say 10 years ago, there was a big push. For 2 or 3 years in a row, it seemed like I had to really get involved and start sharing some actual statistics and facts of this is what's going to happen if we go to points in Idaho. And yeah, it sounds great for the people at the front of the line. There will be a benefit for anybody that gets in after year one. Your odds are going to go down so much exponentially year after year that points aren't going to make sense for you. So for the people who are selfish and only thinking about them and this season, yeah, points make sense. For anybody that's thinking about the future of hunting, points do not make sense. They just, they can't. I mean, yeah, in a once in a lifetime hunt, moose, mountain goat, sheep in Idaho, the odds are so low there that points aren't going to help you. But in your mind, you're thinking, well, it's once in a lifetime. I get my tag, then I'm out of the pool. And yeah, there's an argument there that could be made. But when you look at the statistics of 2%, and you go to points, and after year 10, you're at 4.5% instead of 2%. Yeah, there's an improvement. But somebody getting in at year 10 and just starting and getting points is at 0.02% and never gets above 0.1%. So that, there's too much of a sacrifice for the future of hunting and future hunters it's not worth the reward that the people in the front of the line are going to get. That's just.
But Corey, I'm old and gray, and I need my fourth moose tag before they put me in the dirt.
I understand. Yeah. No. There was a lot of people that just didn't understand how it looked. So I spent a lot of time going through, okay, here's a hunt that right now is a 25% draw. Here's a hunt that's a 10%. Here's a hunt that's a 2%. Let's look at 20 years down the road and every year from now to then, what your odds are, what the person who's getting in that year, their odds are. And at the end of it, they're like, oh, I thought I'd have a better chance of drawing that tag. And, so we educated them, and it seemed like it went quiet. There's always going to be somebody that, even when they understand it, still demand it because they don't care about the future. They just want their tag.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did get a couple emails that there's been some people who have made some comments publicly that we need to look at a point system for Idaho. And it's like, why do we have to continue fighting this fight and educating people? Why I guess my concern is, we did the same thing for lighted nocks and expandable broadheads and things like that. And it's not that anybody's against those things. It's the fact that when technology gets introduced and allowed, people are going to start looking at success rates, and they're going to start saying, well, the more technology we bring in, the higher the success rates are going to be. So to mitigate that, before we have any data, we need to start cutting back on season lengths or opportunities during the rut. And we start losing some of that opportunity. And it's just, again, it's not worth the risk versus reward there. It's not worth it. And so
what you're saying is those people who are trying to convince you and I that Idaho, New Mexico, and Wyoming residents need to go to a point system, they can save their keyboard time and not bother trying to convince us of that.
I've been through every argument. There's not a convincing argument for it. There is not a positive other than I will get my tag tomorrow and forget the rest of you for the rest of eternity, type of a thing. It's just we aren't thinking about the future. We aren't thinking about our kids or our grandkids. We're just thinking about ourselves and getting our tag and getting in and out and then forget about everybody else. But the thing that does scare me is the way that Idaho has gone about passing laws the last couple of years where they just completely skip the public. They skip the Fish and Game Commission and they go straight to a legislator who attaches it to another bill and pushes it through.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we have lighted knocks and we have expandable broadheads because a legislator in North Idaho had a buddy that told him, hey, I think this would be a good idea. We should do this. And they did it. And even though the Fish and Game Commission opposed it, even though the public as a whole doesn't support it, it can still get pushed through. And that's my fear with points is, in legislative season, it wouldn't take much for something to get attached to an important bill that's not even fish and game related. That's not even, on the radar of most of us. And they pass it through and we wake up tomorrow and we have points in Idaho, whether we want them or not. And that's just, that scares me more than any other platform or path that they have to try to get these through. The old way where you could get a hold of commissioners, you could get a hold of legislators, and you could communicate and express to them some of the concerns and actually educate them and help them see why it's not a good idea. We found a backdoor loophole there, and people are exploiting that a little bit, and that we can't manage wildlife. We can't manage hunting. We can't manage hunters doing that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to give any good ideas or bad ideas to your rogue legislators there, but hopefully they don't look at Wyoming and say, well, maybe we just put the non-residents on a point system and we'll sell $9 million worth of elk points every year. And however many million of moose and goat and sheep and pronghorn and deer points.
Yep.
They'd probably have to give you guys a rebate if they did that. They'd collect so much money.
Well, I just, I'm involved a little bit with the Foundation for Wildlife Management. I'm a member there. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that reimburse you for if you kill a wolf or trap a wolf. There's reimbursement program. They've put out some statistics here recently that I think it's 29 elk units in Idaho are under objective.
Wow.
And I'm just throwing these out there. I don't have the actual numbers in front of me. There's a high number of elk units that are under objective for population in the state of Idaho. And almost all of Idaho is way over objective for wolf populations, almost triple the objective. And then there's severe depredation of cattle in, I think, 16 elk units in Idaho. So he's talking about the unbalance there. But then people come out and argue, well, the population of elk in Idaho hasn't really changed in 20 years.
It has, depending on where you're at, just like Montana.
Yeah, and it's unit by unit. So we've got 29 units that are under objective for elk population. That means those units are below where they need to be. And the elk populations are being held down below the objective of what the area can carry. So are there areas where the elk objectives are above? Yeah, for sure. And those areas are almost exclusively private land areas with big chunks of private land that aren't accessible to hunting and to the public hunting. And so it's, you have to really dig into some of these numbers and figure out that, hey, in areas where we're able to manage elk numbers through hunting, elk numbers are low. And that's because wolf numbers are high and they're having an impact there. And now we just had an emergency legislative closure on trapping in a majority of units in Idaho because somebody said, well, what happens if a grizzly bear gets caught in a wolf trap? So they said, well, we got to close it immediately. So there were, I forget, 19 units, 16 units, something like that just closed for trapping wolves, which typically would have been open for much longer, but they had to close because there's a concern now that grizzlies might get caught. And I'm like, first off, there's very few grizzlies in a lot of these areas. There are some, and some of them have more than others, but they're also at the same time wanting to reintroduce grizzlies into these areas. So it's almost like there's conflicting management, and none of it's coming from biology.
No.
Yeah.
Come on, Corey.
Yeah.
That's not what I read in the paper or on Al Gore's internet. Marcus and I, in our Fresh Tracks weekly segment, we do every Friday we release kind of current events and things you should know about. And what we released last Friday was the Equal Access to Justice Act and how these drive-by litigators, these nonprofit groups, have a profit business model based on suing the federal government.
Yeah.
In part of that research, I went to a group based in Tucson who they litigate whether or not the sun came up that day, I think. But last year, of their $36 million of revenue, $9.8 million of it came from legal reimbursements under the Equal Access to Justice Act. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, and the reason that's important is we're talking about habitat things, we're talking about management plans, we're talking about things that the state might want to do, but most often it's a federal land agency. Like in Northwest Montana, that used to be the hotbed of our elk hunting in Montana. Well, anytime the Forest Service tries to do something, they get sued under the premise of, oh, it's bad for grizzly bears, bad for wolves, lynx, bull trout, wolverines,
spotted owls.
Martians from, planet Mars, or maybe there's some people coming from Venus or something and they're endangered. I don't know. Anyhow, these groups use this little weird law called the Equal Access to Justice Act that was originally set up in 1980 for grandma. If she had less than $1 million of net assets, she could sue the federal government for whatever it might be, and she'd get her attorney fees reimbursed. So it was set to be, I think, a 4 or 5 year test law, had a sunset date, the end of 1984. And during that time, the only people who filed and used that were elderly people filing to get their Social Security benefits that they had coming to them. And there were like 280 people used it. And the law got renewed in 1985, and it said, okay, inflation, if you're an individual and you got net assets of under 2 million, you can seek reimbursement. If you are any type of organization, company, whatever, you have net assets under 7 million and less than 500 employees, you can use it. And if you're a nonprofit group, you don't have any restrictions on you. So since that time, where do you suppose the majority of the court cases that have asked for reimbursement of attorney fees has come from? Social Security or environmental litigation?
Yeah, 100% environmental.
Yeah. The number of cases and the dollar amounts are off the charts. It makes this law look like a joke. So Marcus and I were talking about this, and I said, here's really kind of the shell game or the smoke and mirrors or the trick stuff that comes of this law is, who do we get mad at? And what generated this is the Forest Service in Montana had this great big project they were working on. The Elk Foundation, a whole bunch of other groups were like, yeah, finally we're going to have some habitat management here instead of just weeds and other stuff. Well, the Forest Service got sued. And the litigants listed like 20 things, and they prevailed on one of them, I think, maybe two of them, and they're pretty small things. Well, now you got to go back to the drawing board. These groups are going to get not just their costs reimbursed, but they get reimbursed at the going legal rate. So here's where it becomes this profit model: is they hire an attorney and say, an attorney and say, hey, come work for us. We'll pay you $75 an hour, $150,000 a year. We want you to work on this case. And when we submit for reimbursement, the rate in the district court, the federal court that we submitted in, is $350 an hour. So your $1,000 or 1,000 hours is worth $350,000 to us in reimbursement, but for a half year of your wages, we only paid you $75,000. These groups are making money doing this.
Yep.
But they just love to gum up
we the people have to show a receipt down to the penny for everything. We don't it's not like, well, the cost of a loaf of bread in San Francisco costs this much. Right. So no, it's what did you spend? This is what you can hope to get reimbursed on.
Yeah. So this isn't even reimbursement of hard costs. This is reimbursement at almost like a federal per diem level for high cost localities. And this one group, I said, got reimbursed $9.8 million in 1 year for suing the federal government. But then who do we blame? Who do we get frustrated with? Oh, the damn feds, right? Well, they're the ones who are getting sued.
Yeah. So who's come forward with who's paying the reimbursements?
Yeah, the government.
You and me. You and me are.
Yeah.
We're paying environmental groups reimbursement to sue us.
Yeah. And then they don't. Do we ever get mad at them? If you read about it in the paper, oh, the feds aren't doing this, the feds aren't doing that. Your congressperson, when they're running for Congress, are they blaming the litigators? No, they're blaming the feds.
Yeah.
Well, there wouldn't be a court case if the feds hadn't proposed a management action. So the feds propose a management action and they get litigated. So we got judges and litigators who won't let the feds do what they wanted to do. And so we end up with terrible, unproductive landscapes in places like northern Idaho, northwest Montana. You drive through some of that stuff, that is without any canopy disruption. People say, oh, well, let fire do it. Well, that's all fine until that fire shows up in your backyard, and then you're calling saying, hey, put that fire out.
Not only that, I spent 2 hours in an airplane this morning flying over elk country and looking firsthand at the devastation that the fires have done over the last 40 years, 30 years. It's amazing. There is very little timbered elk country left. Really? Like there's pockets here, pockets there, but you can fly for miles and miles and it looks like the moon because those fires burn so hot and so out of control that, there was a fire last summer that we flew over this morning and looked at it and it looks like the moon. Didn't see in areas where we usually see hundreds of elk that winter in there. We didn't see a single elk. They were completely dispersed somewhere else. And not to mention this year's a light winter, so the elk are way up higher than normal anyway. But the cows come down regardless of snow level. They're going to come down and they're going to winter in their winter areas. They weren't there.
Yeah.
No tracks in the snow, nothing.
So there's two things with that fire cycle. One, you just mentioned the intensity at which it burns. The other part that they're realizing, or they've realized for quite a long time now, is that we used to get regeneration from our native plant species. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting regeneration. The disruption patterns that used to benefit wildlife now benefit invasive plant species, most of which native wildlife will not take advantage of or can't take advantage of. So we have huge burns that we always thought, oh man, good, a burn. Well, when they burn at that intensity, it's way different than what would be a natural cycle. And when they repopulate the landscape with nothing but a bunch of, knapweed and cheatgrass and, the list of invasive species goes on and on, that no longer becomes the productive wildlife habitat that it used to be. So in Montana, the Forest Service is like, well, we could go in and mechanically treat a bunch of that stuff and we could, it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. And then they get litigated.
Yep.
The drive-by litigators, I call them.
Because there's a shelled slug snail that lives on the mountain there, and we're afraid that if we go in there, that the 7 of them that we saw last week might not make it. So
Yeah. So the point being that, and this is a smaller group I'm referring to. There are larger groups that bring in way more money each year than this group. This group brought in almost $35 million. Almost 10 million of it was from just legal reimbursements at this profit model they got. Is that really what this law was intended to be? No. So people are always asking us, well, what can I do to help habitat and help wildlife and put more animals on the hillside? You can get a hold of your senator, get a hold of your congressperson and say, I want to reform the Equal Access to Justice Act, where nonprofit groups are subject to the same net worth thresholds as individuals.
yeah.
And if you want to hear some screaming and yelling, when that does pop up, you quickly find out who's got a business model built on that, because they're the ones who pop up and scream and yell and fly to Washington, D.C. and convince, whoever it might be of, oh, well, we couldn't survive without this. Well, sounds to me like you need a better cause then if you can't survive without it.
Yep.
But anyhow.
No, and I think to your point, the reason that was created was it's incredibly hard to sue the federal government.
Right.
It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of time. It's just a very hard thing to do. And so when you look at it, your hands are kind of tied unless you have some kind of protection there saying, we're going to give you equal opportunity protection here. If you need to sue the federal government, then if you prevail, you can get reimbursed and recoup your legal expenses, which are going to be so much higher than any other legal challenge you might face. Well, nonprofits, and who do you think wrote that in there in 1985?
Oh, I can tell you, it came from Daniel Patrick Moynihan, former senator from New York, and the nonprofit world wanted that in there.
Well, I was going to say, nonprofits are the ones who said, hey, if we can get that in there, we can start getting our way without having to actually prove anything. Right. We can just go and sue the federal government. It won't cost us anything. We can just keep everything tied up in litigation, which has been, we've seen it. We saw it with the wolves. We see it with grizzly bears. Everything's nonprofits are the ones who are tying everything up in litigation and forcing the hand of wildlife management out of biology.
Yeah. And making a profit on every dollar or every hour one of their in-house attorneys puts on the quote unquote puts on the books for working on that case.
Yep.
Man, I promised everybody I wasn't going to get worked up today.
If we tried to eliminate that, could you imagine the federal government will get sued by these nonprofits for trying to eliminate the very law that's allowing them to sue them?
Yeah. Well, it was something I really hammered on about 10 years ago, and it got to be so frustrating. I almost kind of let it fall by the wayside. And the more, and this is what when you said about how Idaho's elk population might have stayed static, but in the places where it's accessible, elk numbers are down. Where it's inaccessible, elk numbers are up. That's the exact mirror of Montana.
Yeah.
Our elk numbers are doing well if you want to measure them statewide, but not in the places where we have old decaying habitat, not in the places where we have tons of year-round pressure from not just hunting, but mountain biking, hiking, dog walking, everything else. The public land places, we aren't having this too many elk problem.
Yep.
Well, part of that, if we can work on the habitat part of it, we can start turning some of that around. And no place is it more apparent than Northwest Montana. Northwest Montana, they used to shoot so many nice bull elk up there. And now our objectives for the entire region are like 3,000 elk. They used to shoot more elk than what the high end of the objective is. And it's all habitat and predator driven up there.
Yeah.
And why is it habitat driven? Because it's the litigation capital of Montana.
Can't manage it.
No. So if we're going to fix this, we who want productive landscapes better start hammering our delegations to go and reform the Equal Access to Justice Act. EAJA is what the acronym is. So that's your duty for today, folks.
Yep.
Email your senator or congressman and say, or congresswoman, I want this reformed. I'm sick and tired of the abuse. I'm sick and tired of my taxpayer dollars paying for these groups to make money while suing the federal government over minutia.
Yep.
And I get a lot of people who are like, well, you don't understand. Oh, really? Tell me what I don't understand. You know, I've been in this gig for 30 some years. Tell me what I don't understand. Well, you just don't get it. You're right. I don't get it. But anyhow, enough for that.
Yeah.
What do you got that's going to make us smile, Corey?
Oh, let's see.
I got one.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. You and I aren't allowed to participate, I don't think. But the Elk
well, that's
Foundation.
not going to make me smile.
The Elk Foundation out at rmef.org through May 31st is having this huge raffle. It's called the High Five Dream Hunt Sweepstakes. There's a Utah elk hunt for 2, a Newfoundland moose hunt for 2, Hawaii axis deer for 2, an Idaho mule deer hunt. Those are the first 4 prizes. The 5th prize is $10,000 of cash. And you add up all the prizes, $134,000 worth of prizes. And if you get in on it before May 6th, you're also in on one of the 14 early bird prizes. So there's 12 total prizes, 14 early bird prizes. So you got 26 total prizes if you're in it before May 6th. And you just go out to rmef.org and you buy your tickets. But you and I aren't going to win because we're not allowed to play.
Man.
Well, I didn't get an email saying, hey, you're not allowed to play, but I'm just telling you, you and I aren't allowed to play by the sideboards of the optics and everything else. I don't think it looks
I'm
good.
a life member.
Well, so am I. I'm
I
a
know.
whatever habitat, whatever member. But I just don't think that would be a good idea for us, Corey.
I know. And
But it'd be a really good idea for anyone listening.
I was going to say, and I'm happy to help promote it so that somebody can win because there's a lot there to be given away.
Yeah. And you think about, what if they could just even get the $134,000 of the fair market value of the prizes? Because by the time they get done leveraging that with all the matching money and other places they know to go and get all that matching money, multiply that by about 6 or 7.
Yep.
Now just one little sweepstakes, putting $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 in the ground for habitat.
Yeah.
So that should make people smile.
Exactly.
And we're all a bunch at the core. You know, we're all kind of risk takers with our little raffle money, i.e. tag applications. So if you don't draw your tag this year, you know, you have until May 31st to go and win one of these hunts with the Elk Foundation. So,
yeah.
Or $10,000 of cash. I don't know what I'd do with $10,000 of cash. I never had that much cash in my life.
With the way inflation is, point inflation, speaking specifically, that would get you less than 5 tags in Wyoming.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, if you're lucky with the fee increases and application fees and everything, maybe you could hunt Wyoming 4 more times before you die with that money. But if you put it in...
Take the hunt, don't take the money.
Yeah, but if you put it in my stock portfolio, you'd only be able to hunt Wyoming once probably, and then it'd all be gone. But so I think that should get people smiling.
Exactly.
I don't know if did you find any shed antlers yet, or are we not in shed antler season?
Yeah, I've been out a couple times. I found a couple, but it's a rough year. It's a great year for the elk, which I'm happy that they're having a good year, but it doesn't help me in my shed hunting endeavors. We went out this weekend, and typically I'll get into bulls in the area that we were at between 4,500 and 4,800 feet in elevation, maybe up to 5,000, depending on the year. I was at 5,600 feet and I was able to cross north faces without any snow.
Whoa.
And I was getting into herds of cows in the timber at 5,600 feet, which typically the cows are down at 4,000, 3,600 to 4,000 feet on the open hillsides. and they had already moved all the way up to over 5,000 feet. They were in the timber, and the bulls, I would see one bull by himself on a timbered ridge right at daylight, and none of the typically this time of year, you're finding groups of 6 to 10, 11, 12 bulls, all bachelored up together, all down on those open ridges at 4,800 feet, finding the green grass on the benches when it's coming up. And it was almost like they'd already left the winter. All the elk had left the winter range, the cows, the bulls, everything, and dispersed back up the mountain.
Wow. Well, so, what's going to happen to all those antlers then if you don't find them?
They're just going to be spread
chipmunks going to eat them?
Oh yeah, chipmunks. Yeah, they'll just be 2 here, 2 there, up in the timber, so they're harder to find. You got to walk right up on them instead of sitting on a knob glassing an open hillside, and it's going to be a lot more difficult. But the good news is the elk are getting a jump start on nutrition. I haven't found more than maybe 2 or 3 dead elk all winter from wolf kills, which typically, I mean, there's years where I'll find 8 or 10 in a day.
Yeah.
And this year the wolves didn't seem to eat as well because the elk were able to stay out of the deep snow and stay spread out. So the wolves weren't able to hunt them in concentrated areas. And I really think that after last winter, especially, the elk are going to thrive, and the mule deer for that matter as well.
Cool. Well, they could use a break.
They could.
We need mild winters and wet springs and summer for about another 10 years.
Yeah. Well, and yes, mild summers is the key, because we get a wet spring and a hot summer, and that just creates a wildfire hotbed.
Yeah. Huh. Well, as a guy who, in all my years of travel, I only have 1 set of shed antlers. And that was just because I brought them. I was going to give them to a guy, and I couldn't find him when I went to give them to him. So I thought, well, I better bring them home then. So they're laying in my shop. I know what I'm going to do with them. There wasn't any, it was out in the sagebrush, so there wasn't any tree to hang them in. So I packed them out, and the crew has got all this footage. They're like, can you believe Randy's packing out a set of elk antlers? Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I'm like, don't tell anybody.
Yeah. I think a good shed hunting strategy would be just follow Randy around and get his tracks and look in the trees, because everywhere Randy goes, if there's a shed antler, it ends up on a tree limb.
Yeah, I remember the looks you gave me in New Mexico when I was doing that. It was the look of, are you for real, man? Are you really going to do that?
See, and during elk season, I'll pack out big sheds, or but I leave 90% of them during hunting season too.
Do you?
Because I mean, I don't know. I love being out there this time of year. There's just something when the hillside turns green and the snow melts off of it that I want to walk on that hillside. And the motivation is a big brown shed antler laying somewhere there, and that just gets me out and gets me hiking around. But I get them back to the house, and they go in a pile, and I end up selling them. And I don't, there's certainly people have said, I'm gonna quit my job this spring and just shed hunt, make money shed hunting. Well, I started shed hunting in the mid 1980s, early to mid 1980s, and there has not been a single year that I can say I made a profit. The amount of time and money that is spent in gas and time and gear out there doing it, you don't even want to talk like you might break even, let alone make money on it. So there's probably people in certain areas that do it for money, and they've got a herd of elk or access to some land somewhere or something where it's like, I can go in there in 4 or 5 days and make a couple $1,000s, and that's financially beneficial. For me, I spend way more in gas than I'll ever make in picking up sheds. So,
well, I already got enough bad habits that cause my budget to take a hit. I don't need to pick up any other diversions of funds and diversions of time.
Yeah,
because my wife has informed me that I've been spending too much time on the road lately. And yeah, and she used the term the other day, or else. And I don't know, I never, or else just scares the heck out of me, Corey. I've never traveled to where that boundary of or else is. When I get close to it, at least she gives me big warning. Hey, or else.
Yep.
I'm like, I don't want to go there. So kind of thinking I better adjust my calendar at least between now and hunting season. So I'll do that.
So you're going to be walleye fishing a lot.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be doing whatever. I think walleye fishing. But if she wants to go to, I don't care. I just tell her, well, you tell me what we're doing. I'll go there and smile. But so, yeah, I don't need to take up, this kind of diversionary tactic of picking up antlers out in the hill. That would just be more time, more money, and
Yep.
put pressure on my hunting schedule when the time comes.
Well, it's a good year for shed hunting to be a little more difficult, because I, similar to you, have plenty of work that needs to get done. And if I was being distracted by shed hunting multiple days a week, it probably wouldn't get done. So now I'm not as drawn. I mean, I still want to be out there, but I don't have the dreams of large piles of brown antlers laying on a hillside anywhere, because the reality is they just aren't this year. So I'll probably get more work done at home and at the office.
Well, then you'll be ready to go come September.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I plan on just fishing and then going straight into hunting, because I kind of like fishing is a lot easier than hunting. Either that or walleye, they're just dumb. I kind of get my self-confidence built back up in walleye season, and then along comes archery elk season, and I'm completely deflated. I just like, man, I don't have a clue. I don't even know. I should just sell my bow or give it away.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like shed hunting. September, if nothing else, is a great time to be in the mountains. And
true. Absolutely true.
There's a lot of people that just say, you know what, I'm not here to kill an elk. Elk season is the motivation and the excuse to get me out in the mountains. And
that's a good reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good reason. Yeah. All right. Well, you cheered me up already then.
All right. Don't go selling your bow.
No, it's what, early April, and I'm already excited for September.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my calendar. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to spend so much time elk hunting in September. Or I hope I am.
Elk are going to be bugling in less than 5 months.
True.
I mean, we made it through winter. We're on the other side of winter here. We're less than 5 months away from elk bugling.
Yeah. And you and I are lucky that we live in a state where we get to just go buy a general tag, and we got a lot of places to go. So I never take that for granted. And if I were to take it for granted, all I got to do is go talk to a lot of these people where I travel around, do seminars and, fundraisers and stuff. And I hear how the elk hunting is in their state.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, don't ever let me complain again.
Yeah. You just feel for the people living, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico. I mean, New Mexico, there's some areas, but the good areas are off limits to residents too for years and years and years. And they wait 15, 20 years before they can draw a tag as a resident.
Yeah. So never forget how lucky we are for a lot of reasons.
Absolutely.
I always say, what a country. And I mean that when I say it, but people think I'm joking. No, what a country that we live here and we get to do this stuff.
Yep.
I'm thankful I wasn't born in Bolivia or, Spain, or nothing against Bolivia or Spain, but I don't think the elk hunting's that great in those places.
There's probably some states in the U.S. we could include on that list.
Well, I thought about doing that, but every time I do it, then someone says I'm picking on them. So I thought, well, I don't think we got many listeners in Bolivia or Spain, so maybe I'm safe there.
We're going to get emails. I guarantee you we're going to get emails now.
And I also thought, well, we'll make it through one podcast where something comes out of my mouth that doesn't cause Corey to sit up straight in his chair and be like, oh no. So I made it.
Yeah.
I mean,
unless you're from Bolivia or Spain.
Well, true. Yeah. If you're from Bolivia or Spain, hey, I love you, man, but your elk hunting just sucks. So, and this is called the Elk Talk Podcast for a reason. So, yeah. If you keep me on here much longer, Corey, I will do or say something that is going to cause you some heartburn or indigestion.
I think you've got cabin fever. I think you're looking out the window at some sunshine, and
Yep,
you need
I
to just
do.
go out and walk around the building or something.
Yeah, I definitely do. So, I think what we should do, I think the audience probably has cabin fever also. Maybe
Yep.
we should let them go.
Yeah. I think we've held them for an hour here.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually pretty good. It usually only takes us 15 minutes to stack up a pile of email responses.
No, I think it was a good discussion today, though. I think similar to previous discussions, you were worried about talking about some boring political things. And I just think that this time of year and the landscape and, an election year and all these things, I think it's important to bring these to the surface and make sure that we're informed and educated on some of the things that are going on around us and some of the things that we just have to be prepared for that are going to happen. And when we look at Colorado, there's things that are going to happen in Colorado that are not going to be painless for us as hunters. That's the way it is. It's going to be painful, and there's going to be some things that are changed that are probably going to feel like we're making a sacrifice or giving something up.
Yeah. Well, I was about ready to have spring fever, and then you reminded me it was an election year. Oh, man.
Well,
There's a
let's
reason.
not go down that road. Let's not. We want to
All
keep
right.
it positive.
There's
here.
hope. Yeah, let's not worry about that till November.
Well,
heck with that. All right. Well, folks, if you're like me, let's all live in a fantasy land that it's not election season. But oh well. See now my mind's already about ready to go down that path.
Let's just pull the plug here.
All right, folks. Thanks for being here. Until next time. I'm sure Corey will come up with. I'd leave it up to Corey to come up with what will be the good topic, and then he kind of springs it on me at the end, just before we fire up the band here and turn the record button on. And then he wonders why I might say something spontaneous that gets us in trouble.
I just don't like to give Randy too much time to prepare, because then he over prepares. And if you spring something on him, you get the unfiltered, this is how I feel and this is how I see it, which I think is how it probably should be.
All right. Well, I'm going to let him go then before I start going unfiltered again.
There we go. All right. We'll catch you next time.
All right, folks. Thanks for being here. Until next time. I'm sure Corey will come up with. I'd leave it up to Corey to come up with what will be the good topic, and then he kind of springs it on me at the end, just before we fire up the band here and turn the record button on. And then he wonders why I might say something spontaneous that gets us in trouble.
I just don't like to give Randy too much time to prepare, because then he over prepares. And if you spring something on him, you get the unfiltered, this is how I feel and this is how I see it, which I think is how it probably should be.
All right. Well, I'm going to let him go then before I start going unfiltered again.
There we go. All right. We'll catch you next time.